everyone, I'm Elaine Chow.
And I'm Trist Curless.
And welcome to The Musician's Loop.
Loop, like a drum loop?
No, like the kind of thing that a jeweler uses to evaluate gems.
Oh, like a magnifying glass, like what we'll do on this podcast, actively listening to music like a musician.
That's right. And every week, we are choosing a track to dive into together and share our thoughts about what we find intriguing about the song.
Whether it's songwriting, chord progression, instrumentation, recording technology, arrangement, whatever, we're looking at the music we love through the lens, or the loop, of decades in the music industry.
Hey, Trist, what do we have this week?
Well, we have a favorite. Well, I know they're all favorites. That's what it should be called. The podcast should be called Trist's Favorite Songs. No, so this is from Kenny Loggins.
Okay.
So, we know about him. Most people think about him just in terms of all the darn soundtrack songs he had in the 80s, etc.
100%.
But as you know, because I've sent you this ahead of time and you gave a listen, what can you tell me about the beginning of this song?
What can I tell you? Well, it has a really interesting a cappella section that sounds... I don't even know how to quantify the sound. Definitely has a lot more soul than I would kind of expect from such a rocker like Kenny Loggins. And yeah.
Okay, what if I told you that other than Kenny Loggins singing the lyrics, that there are no male voices on it?
Oh, okay. All right.
So there's definitely a reason you thought it was soulful, because three singers that are on there include Sheryl Crow,
ooh,
Siedah Garrett,
okay,
both singers who sang backgrounds for Michael Jackson.
Okay.
And Siedah Garrett also co-wrote Man in the Mirror and sang the duet with him on I Just Can't Stop Loving You, that song.
Okay.
She co-wrote that and sang the duet with him. So the two of them are background singers. And the key element that I'm getting at is that low voice is the low Pointer sister, Ruth Pointer.
Okay, that was not the trio that I was expecting, but amazing. So tell us more about the song. Like, which one are we listening to?
This is If You Believe on his album from 1991 called Leap of Faith.
Okay, so we are about to break for a brief moment to listen to the song. All of the links are going to be in our show notes, so pause us right as you're hearing our music. But before we do, Trist, can you talk a little bit about how we should be listening to music?
Absolutely. I like to take this time, if you can, to just upgrade. Give yourself an upgrade. Everyone loves an upgrade. I'm a frequent flyer. I love an upgrade. Give yourself an audio upgrade. And if you can, unless you're, walking around or in your car and can't really do it, get yourself the best listening possible. So get the nice headphones, put it on the nice system, put the car settings on the best listening possible, turn off your phone, don't pay attention to anything but this song when you give a listen. Upgrade your listening.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to pause right now and we will be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so If You Believe by Kenny Loggins. Why did you choose this song, Trist?
Man, I don't know. It's one of my feel-good songs. It's just motivating. I can't even say that I've ever really, really, really dug into the deeper meanings of all of the lyrics. I get the general vibe. I'm a sucker for those chords at the end, the vamp, a kid's choir, the cool intro that's a cappella. There's so much about it I like. I really just dig it.
Yeah, that a cappella intro was part of the reason when I first heard the song, right? So when 8 years ago, something like that. One of the things that I was thinking about was, this song is probably the reason why Trist recommended it to me, because of the vocals and because of just the way that it was different, I think, than your typical pop song.
Oh, when I recommended the whole album, the Leap of Faith album, right?
That's right. You recommended the entire album to me, and I listened to the entire thing over the course of a couple of weeks. And this a cappella segment at the very beginning was one where I was like, oh, this is why he recommended this album. Partially because I think you've done the same thing for other albums as well, where there have been other albums with really interesting choral backgrounds or, vocal pieces, people who have stepped in to sing parts or to be featured artists on certain albums. But there was a lot more in there that I was very surprised to hear on my nth time through. I don't remember, but definitely in a deeper listen through, which is what we're trying to do here in this podcast. So, some of the areas that I was maybe a little more surprised to hear about were the chord changes. It's not your typical pop song where, you have exactly the same chords over and over and over again. There's something slightly different about each time through that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. This album comes definitely, as I mentioned before, kind of after his I will have a song on every hit movie soundtrack part of his life, which I'm sure his bank account loves. And, it's not that those songs weren't good songs. I think he was really good at that job for Caddyshack and Top Gun, etc. All those movies, those are just great classic songs. But this is the stereotypical thing we hear about. Yeah, make the label a bunch of money and then maybe they'll just let you do artistically whatever the heck you want to do. So whether that's true or not, that's my in my world, that's what's happening here is he's like, hey, I've done plenty for you. Now I'm just going to make the album I like with musicians I love and do what I want to do and do 6 and 7 and 8 minute songs instead of 3 and 4 minute songs. So that's kind of where this happens in 91.
91. Yeah. Really interesting time in American history, I'd say, but also in musical history. I think it's really interesting that Sheryl Crow is singing backgrounds on this, just because I think of her as an artist from, not 91. I'm thinking of her as an artist in late 90s, early 2000s, really coming into her own solo, career by that point in time.
Yeah, I think that first big album for her was even like 94, 95. So yeah, like so many, brand new artists, they've been kicking around trying to do it for so long. Like I said before, sang backgrounds with Michael Jackson, studio singer. Matter of fact, there's even a duo on this Kenny Loggins album where she's the duet partner. And the most stringent Sheryl Crow fan probably wouldn't even necessarily recognize that it's her. Just a chameleon vocally doing whatever the song calls for before she's doing her own thing on her album. I think that's interesting as well, as a side note.
Yeah, it is also interesting, though, listening to this song. There's something about the instruments that are chosen here, specifically the keys, that really bring me back to kind of the late 80s, early 90s. It still kind of harkens to that era.
Absolutely.
And I couldn't exactly tell whether, I think it had to do with the synth sounding like it had a deeper attack to it, just like a stronger attack. It almost sounded a little bit like a harpsichord in some places where it had that just like very sharp attack. And that combined with some of the sustain in there, it just made me think a lot about the type of music that we're listening to in the late 80s, early 90s. So I just thought that was interesting. Like, is that something that you heard as well?
Yeah, I like how that's combined with also actual real acoustic piano and real organ. So especially because while there's no religious content, there's a little gospel-y feel in some of it when you add that organ sound. And it's such an uplifting thing. So even if it's kind of non-denominational, just good feeling, it's in the same ballpark as that, especially when you add those sounds.
Yeah, and I like what you're talking about, because I feel like there are a couple of different choral genres that are mixing here. Like you've got this enthusiastic kids choir, you have an adult choir that's behind them, there are some vocals interleaved throughout, and then that very strong introductory like vocal piece,
right, which isn't really like any of the rest of the song, interestingly
it's
enough.
Not, and it really stands out. And I listened to that a cappella section a couple of different times just to think about some of the lessons that I've learned arranging for a cappella over the years, and just how much I still have to learn, right? Yep. You were talking in a previous episode about the vocal band or contemporary a cappella background, where it's more like, hey, you know, how do you sound more like instruments? You have like your vocal percussion, you have your vocal bass, you have a lot of oohs or like, you know, horns going on in the background, you have people doing harmonica, etc. And, you know, this introductory section was very human. There were a lot more pieces where people, a lot, like everyone was singing the words, the lyrics, right? As opposed to singing oohs in the background. But it swapped back and forth between that, where sometimes you had the voices doing more textural stuff in the background as a soloist was singing in front. And then sometimes it was more like a 4-part choral or barbershop kind of experience where, you know, everyone's singing the lyrics at the same time. There isn't even any extra thing that's going on top of it to give a little more texture to it. So I just thought that was really interesting as I was listening to it.
Yeah, I think my little anecdote about Ruth Pointer singing the low part on there. I was working at a record store at the time it came out, and I remember hearing the intro. And of course, I was obsessed with anything a cappella, so I ran over to where the liner notes were because I was looking for who the low singer was. And, you know, it's Kenny Loggins and Siedah Garrett and Sheryl Crow and Ruth Pointer. And I'm like, cool, but what's the low voice? And then when I realized Ruth Pointer, I was like, oh, wait a minute. I remember those Pointer Sisters songs when they had that song Automatic, which you may not have heard of, but she's like, the lead vocal is like right in the middle of my voice range.
Wow.
And so they always were known for having a broad, you know, they had those, the early Pointer Sisters, there were actually 4 of them on some early jazz recordings. So there's always this lower voice. And I thought, oh, you know what? I bet that's her. So I always tell my female friends, I was like, yeah, sing along with this and see if you can sing those low notes.
100% no, unless I have some kind of a trust cold, in which case, you know, the best I've been able to get is a B flat down there. But
anyway, I just always think that's cool. But that's not the only thing that's cool about it. The music is super cool. The arranging is really nice. That's just an extra little thing I love about it.
Yeah, I also think that there's something about the feel of a song. Like you were talking about it being a feel-good song. It has a very bouncy sound to it. You know, it's a very mid-tempo, bouncy, and not a very typical kind of like what you would consider rock. But at the same time, you know, Pharrell's Happy, for instance, was not necessarily something that you would think of as like typical rock, but it had a very peppy feel to it as well. So yeah, I just thought it was interesting how the bass really carried that bounce. And I was listening very carefully to how the bass was doing. You know, it was like very hard on the 1, and then there was something right in that interim, like 1.5, kind of like boom, boom, you know, that led to that sense of bounce. And I think that led me to thinking about like how each instrument contributes to the feel of a particular song. So I'm kind of curious about what you think about that.
Absolutely. How they use those textures. What's where the producer comes in. Like, okay, what's the lyric here? What's the uplifting thing about this that we're going to add? Oh, yeah, I'm going to add that extra vibrato that comes in from that organ sound is going to give this feel. And the actual piano is going to be, okay, it's going to give this section this feel, et cetera. And then again, the way that it builds, adding the children's choir. To me, the children's choir is a key. Like, if you believe in me, I'll believe. Whatever the different lines are. So that's the crux of it. Even though there's lots of different lines that probably mean a lot, you can't get past that, about that, like how important someone's support is. So if you believe in me, then I can believe, like how important mentorship is, etc. So you believe in me, I can believe in these things. So I love the kids choir in there at the end.
That is really interesting because, you know, as many people know here probably by now, I don't hear words very well. I have to be concentrating really, really hard to understand the words on a first listen. And so I went and I chased down the lyrics and, you know, was staring at the lyrics because I used to teach English as well. And I was like, okay, what does this song actually mean? And the question that I wrote down as I was listening to this was, who is the audience of the song? And I was reading through it, and you know, the longer I read through it, the more I was wondering, is this a protest song? Is this a question about the future of the world and like who owns the future of the world? And that got me to, I was down in a rabbit hole and trying to think about like, what is the context of the song? Because, you know, a song is not released in a vacuum, right? It's released in a cultural context. And so as we're talking about 1991 and, you know, thinking about, all right, if it's released in 91, probably like recorded in 1990 and probably written sometime before then, what was happening in the late 80s, early 90s? And I'm like, oh my goodness, so much was happening on a geopolitical fashion at that point in time. You know, we're talking about the Iran-Iraq war, we're talking about the end of the Cold War, we're talking about all sorts of like tensions that are happening worldwide. And in the middle of this, there's songs about doves, you know, rising and then love, like it's calling out to me. And there's a lot about future, there's a lot about past, there's a lot about hopes and dreams. In the middle of this comes like the kids choir, which is like, you know, we're talking now, and I feel like I'm trying to connect all of these very discrete pieces together. But I think if I look at these lyrics, at least through the lens of War and Peace, and looking at the lens of, you know, the future of our world and the current people who run it, it really begins to say, oh, is this actually a protest song? Or is it about mentorship? Or is it about some of these things? And I personally find myself having to stare at these lyrics a lot more and think about, at the very beginning, you know, you were talking about the pseudo-religious or the semi-religious overtones of some of these things, and the concept of doves and love and peace and love and all of this imagery that's happening in the song. So I don't know if I'm right or not. I don't know if the songwriter is going to come back to me and say, oh, you got it totally wrong. But I think that there is something about looking at the lyrics together and thinking about, okay, what does a bridge mean? What is a bridge saying? And even that got me super confused, because there are double entendres, there are different ways of interpreting things. Is someone out of their mind because they're like crazy, or are they out of their mind because they're not overthinking things now, and so therefore, you know, or they're out of their mind meaning that, you know, they've disengaged and now they're like thinking about something. So there's a whole bunch of different ways that each one of these phrases could be interpreted, and each one I think cascades down in the way that you think about lyrics. And I think that's also part of the beauty of the songwriting art form, right? Is that there are so many different ways to positively and properly interpret like what someone is going to say, unless you are like me and like inserting not the right words in lots of different places. I'm like, no, that's not what it actually says. But yeah, just kind of curious about if that changes your mind about this at all.
No. I like deeper songs like that, where you can take the surfer lyrics and take them for face value, or read into them many different layers. You know, again, I'm seeing a lot of things get kind of what I was talking about. If you believe in me, I'll believe in what will be, you know, because we want the same things, the world we only dreamed of, right? I think a lot of that in your context of right at the end of the Cold War, that kind of thing, like, oh, these new possibilities are opening up. Yeah, give us the future. That's all we need of you. Like, give us the space to do the things we want to do, etc. So yeah, I see where that kind of comes into play.
Well, let us know what you think by sending us an email at The Musician's Loop, that is LOUPE@gmail.com, or reaching out to us on Instagram or on Threads. We would love to hear from you.
And you can include information about if you like the out chorus to that as much as I do. Man, those chords, that last ending gets me every time. I'm a sucker for those big flat 6, flat 7, 1 uplifting chords. So let me know if you're a sucker for those, just the way that I am.
I am. So feel free to reach out to us either via email, which we just gave to you, or on Instagram or Threads. We would love to hear from you. Instagram, it's The Musician's Loop, same thing on Threads. But before we go, we have one more segment. It is called
Mailbag.
The Mailbag. All right. Today's mailbag is actually not from Threads.
Oh.
And it is not an email. It's actually my question.
Oh, no. We're in trouble.
Yes, so it's my personal question for you, Trist, although I do have thoughts about this. So here's a question. How do you think about lessons or group coaching? And so when I say how, what I'm really saying is, what differences are there between the benefits of either individual coaching or, team coaching? And how have the two impacted your musical career?
Oh, goodness. I think both have been super important. I think, obviously, individual lessons with someone, whether I'm taking them or giving them, can be very specific to like a technique, an attitude, sometimes a physical manifestation, like, oh, every time you sing this kind of music, etc., you do this thing. So someone just identifying the issues that you might have or your strengths, etc. So I think that's super important. And that differs from group because you're talking about the way that people sing together and what those tendencies are, and I shape your musicality as well. So I don't know. I think they're both important. I think there can be some similarities, but I think they're pretty different because there's just different focuses. There's different focus on your individual habits or variety or your instrument, etc., strengthening different parts of what you do. Whereas working with an entire group, you're working with how they work together. You might address individual issues, etc., but you're mostly talking about how people work together to make the music.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is something in there about that. I am really curious about how you approach both your individual lessons with students or how you approach adjudicating or discussing things, or even going into a classroom as an invited instructor or someone who comes and coaches choirs. Like, can you talk a little bit about how your approach differs between the two?
Oh, right. Well, similarly, like I just said, so an individual student, like what are their goals? What am I going to help them do individually? And what can I sense in their tone production, in their just in the way that their mechanism is working, how they're breathing, etc. Sometimes that technical, or sometimes if they're a little more advanced, how they're phrasing or how they're approaching a particular kind of style of music that they're doing, and helping them find listening actually quite often to examples of things that are more in a style and things to copy or things to follow. Whereas when I go in individually as a group, generally I have a smaller amount of time. So generally it's, okay, from these 2 or 3 listens in this group of people that I've never heard before, what 1 or 2 things can I say that'll make their performance together better as quickly as possible? Whereas with the individual student, sure, I want some instant quick fixes like, oh, you keep tensing up your jaw. Let's get that loosened. I can address that right away, but I might have a 4 or 5 lesson arc of something that I'm trying to address in an individual student.
So you generally have more time with an individual
right.
student.
Right. So unless I know I'm going to be hired to go into a classroom, once a week for a month, I don't have that. It's like, hey, come and listen to our group, and here's the music we prepared, and our show is next week. What can we do in that 1 week that'll make that performance better? And at that point, I might address with the director something that I think they need to work so their show on the next semester is good because it's a bigger issue. But right then I'm just listening for, what quick, easy things can fix this and kind of polish this up.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious also about the concept of clinics. And so I'm thinking about, you have a sample group, like a small ensemble, and then you have a whole lot of people in the audience who are listening to you as you're giving feedback.
Oh, yeah.
How do you approach that?
That's interesting because sometimes, you switch your goal. Sometimes you're, quote unquote, teaching the singers in front of you, and that's how it appears. But you might well know that the singers in front of you know the information that you're telling them already, and you're really using that as a vehicle to teach a whole audience of people something. So without just turning around and talking to the audience, hey, this is what you should do, is you kind of vacillate between truly working with the group, and sometimes you kind of tailor make it to, okay, I'm really teaching the group something, and if out there you happen to be paying attention, this is something you should do with your groups. That's where that's kind of fun and interesting. Sometimes I break that wall and just tell them directly, these guys know this, but I'm going to show you this. And sometimes you're a little more sly about it. And it's as if you're only teaching the students, and on stage, they're giving you that like smile, like, oh, I see. We're already good at this, but you're just pointing it out so the audience can pick up on it.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm actually kind of curious from a consumer's perspective. Like, you have not only done this as an instructor, but you've also attended a whole lot of clinics. You've been as a student, like as an individual student, etc. What parts of your musicality or your skills has improved in each one of these contexts?
Oh, man. Well, the ability to do it myself is exclusively from watching that. So in high school and college, going to those kinds of festivals, where there are vocal groups and there are clinicians, adjudicators that come up and work with the students, seeing amazing educators through my life do that very thing is absolutely the reason I have any ability to do it myself. So seeing how they approach it and how they get right to the point, I learned that kind of early on, like, oh, I heard like 100 things I would fix about the way that group sings, but wow, that person picked out the 2 things that gave them the most improvement the fastest, etc. So, man, super important. And just hearing different perspectives is really valuable.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because, like, my musical background, I started out in individual instruction as a piano student, right? So it's just me and the piano teacher week after week after week. Maybe I saw someone if I were taking some kind of national exam, but that's about it. Maybe we would have the occasional performance with other students of this teacher. But I didn't really experience these group experiences and these group instruction until I started singing in college. And so in college, I was learning all of these things about vocal production, about breath work, and about posture, diaphragm engagement, etc. in these group settings because I couldn't afford individual instruction at that point in time. And it wasn't until I moved into a cappella that I began to learn more about hearing other people get feedback, right? And so these types of critiques that came to other groups, and I began to recognize and realize like how these patterns manifested itself in my group. So it was really interesting for me to have these different experiences at different parts of my life and just reflect on the different types of learning that I had. And then also connect it to how I teach martial arts right now and how it's very different, mostly because you don't have that ensemble experience, right? You're not at that point where anyone is working together unless we're doing a skit of some kind. But really, my job as an instructor is very similar to my job as a high school teacher when I was teaching high school, which is very much, all right, how do I get each student leveling up at all times, right? How do I differentiate experiences or differentiate instruction so that each one of them will get a little bit of something every single class? How can I make sure that everyone gets that individualized attention, which I think is very different in ensemble, right? Where we're trying to create a specific sound as people are blending together. You can begin to think about how do we create this thing together and how do we coach each group to be better and give other people visibility into how each group is getting better for their own improvement.
Yeah. How would you say that applies to you in your day job workspace?
Ooh, in my day job workspace. You know, we are constantly trying to improve. And one of the things that we do is both self-reflection as well as external input.
This is in
and
software,
so if I think about, so when I say external input, if I think about something like coaching, like career coaching, I am currently in a season where I've paid for someone outside of the company to come and speak truth into my life and ask me the right questions so that I know how to grow. And this is something that I don't do very often. It is something that is certainly a privilege to be able to pay for and have my company pay for this. We also have external consultants that will come in and give us advice. Sometimes that helps, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes we have people from outside of our group, and I'm constantly soliciting feedback from outside of our group. So I have mentors inside of the company, but outside of my group, who will give me feedback on, you know, what I might want to consider or approach or change as I enter into this next season or as we're undergoing some kind of a challenge. So that external feedback I think is really important. And at the same time, our team has a regular pattern, a regular practice. And this is, I think, across the industry, across the software industry, especially as they're looking at something called Agile, to constantly reevaluate and think, is there anything we could do better from a process perspective? Is there anything we could do better now to make sure that our future lives are going to be easier? And I think that is something that is incredibly healthy and something that we should continue to do in, growthful ways. But yeah, that external feedback aspect of it, I think, is really important and maybe a little underutilized.
Awesome.
Yeah. We would love to hear from you either on Instagram or Threads. We have been posting a whole lot of things for you to respond to. Hopefully something just kind of like tickles your fancy or is something that you might be interested in discussing a little bit further. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, let us know what you think.
Awesome. So that is it for this week. We will see you next week on The Musician's Loop.
See you soon.
I'll probably cut out that bye. Thank God for editing.
Exactly.
You haven't told me what song it is yet.
You hear me still?
Yep.
Do you hear me now?
Yep.